My brother-in-law 24 moved in with me and my husband, his brother after he broke up with his ex-girlfriend due to infidelity. I've claimed and prepared his room for him, and he's been staying with us for a few days. His ex-girlfriend showed up while I was home alone and asked me if I could get my brother-in-law's ship model for her. I asked why and she told me he gifted it to her, so it was hers. I went into his room, looked through his closet to find it, then gave it to her. She thanked me and left. Brother-in-law got home and then before dinner, he rushed out of his room asking if anyone saw his ship model. I told him his ex-girlfriend showed up and asked me to get it for her since she said he gifted it to her. He was shocked. Initially, he then went off on me saying she was lying, that this ship model is worth over $2,000 and that it's a family heirloom he inherited from his dad. I asked him to please calm down and not raise his voice at me when he's a guest at my home. He told me I had no right to enter his room, let alone go through his stuff, then give something of high value to his ex. We got into an argument and my husband said that I messed up by going into his room in the first place. I reminded him that this is my house and I don't need permission from anyone to enter any room in my house. They both gave me the cold shoulder and brother-in-law started complaining about having to go through a living nightmare to get the ship model back and mentioned police, saying that what his ex did was theft and basically blamed me, saying I technically helped her by touching stuff that isn't mine without permission. I think they're being harsh and unreasonable. But am I the idiot? Ma, you are the idiot. Being your house does not give you a pass to go through your brother-in-law's personal belongings. And why would you automatically assume his ex was telling the truth? I would have immediately been suspicious, at the very least called or texted him before handing anything over. You seem to have a very entitled attitude. So I'm guessing you'll not take your judgment here graciously and offer your brother-in-law the apology he deserves. Just to make it clear, if you were ever spending a few days at my home, would you be okay if I just went through your things, got your purse, took your money and spent it without bothering you? You were in my place, I'm allowed to do so. Can you at least realize how absurd your reasoning is? Besides, he came home asking for it. She not only probably knew how much it meant for him, as she must have told him or sent a P after you delivered. Obviously, the ex-girlfriend was trying to get back at you, your brother-in-law, and boy, she couldn't have asked for a better accomplice. Where's your common sense? If anyone you don't fully know shows up at the door asking for something, you verify that with the person who's related to the other by any means. Ship models cost a fortune. You should also know that models of practically anything cost a fortune. Start treading water because you're sinking. And there may even be grounds to sue in this situation because you took something that wasn't yours. And your brother-in-law lost a significant piece of history and money out of this. I hope he sues you. Story 2. A few years ago, my dad had a pretty public affair. They thought they were being discreet, but everyone knew, with a woman about 15 years younger than him. My father was, up until this point, a very stoic, unemotional person, and this was totally out of character and everyone was talking about it. So he ended up leaving my mom for her. My mom was totally ice cold during all of this, and even as her son, I can't gauge if it hurt her or not. She had zero reaction. She's never said anything bad about him. Even when I tried to get her to open up, she just wouldn't. But this is around the time I began dating my fiancé, and she didn't like her and began to ice me out as well. My dad married his affair partner recently and I proposed to my fiancé. We had an engagement party, probably the first time we were all together. Mother-in-law and her friends hate my dad and his fiancé because I think they worry about their husbands getting ideas. Mother-in-law made a snarky comment about how when men leave for a younger woman, isn't she supposed to be prettier? Of course, my dad might have done it wrong because my mom is much more attractive. All of her friends laughed and my dad's wife looked like she was dying inside. My mom told my mother-in-law to stop, and she didn't like women who pit women against each other and said that his wife was beautiful. When we walked away, I told my mom that was very gracious and I was proud of her. I wasn't even talking to my fiancé, but she lost it. She said I was gross for praising my mom for being gracious when she should be a petty witch. She said I wasn't a fair apologist, which made her nervous, and I should have laughed at her mom's comment. My mom called my fiancé an idiot and walked away. My fiancé is still upset that I said that and keeps saying it was misogynistic in 1950s. But I can't really explain. Not the idiot, your mom is the wrong party. So everyone should take her lead. The fact that your fiancé thinks public humiliation when it's someone else's event is okay is a red flag. You should be worried. She'll pull petty BS on you. Agreed. OP's mom is acting like a mature adult despite what went down with her ex-mother-in-law. Her friends and OP's fiancé act like immature schoolyard. Mean girls bullying is still wrong even if said bully feels like they have a reason to do. So your mom has class and knows her worth. It wasn't worth her time to wallow over her cheating ex, and it isn't worth her time to engage in petty BS. OP's Beyonce may not be mature enough to understand the power in OP's mom's response. Not just graciousness, it makes her almost untouchable. Now as an object of pity and disgrace, she's her own woman who can see the truth without it diminishing her. Not everyone has to turn themselves into ugly people because something ugly happened to them. Your mom is a class act and you were right for telling her. So I want to acknowledge that I was an idiot 8 years ago, along with being a major Godzilla. I had my wedding on a Wednesday afternoon. We were late sending out invites and many of my guests had to take off work and travel several hours to be there. When many people declined, I went to Facebook and ranted about people not making time for important things and being terrible friends and relatives. I'm ashamed of this and hate that I did this. Story 3. An old friend of mine, Paul, had just started a new job, took the day off work, drove 5 hours and gave us a very generous gift. I was so touched and still remember how nice it was to see him. Life is different. Now, we have a young child and a toddler. Paul is getting married in October. It's 5 hours away. We got to save the date and the invitation. I tried to get child care for the day, but no relatives were willing to do it and we couldn't afford a babysitter. It's my day off and my husband is hourly, so taking the day off would mean no income and we'd have to pay a sitter. I apologized to Paul and told him that we could not arrange childcare that day, and it was a far distance to travel so we couldn't be there. He replied that was why he had given us plenty of advance notice so that childcare wouldn't be a problem. I was a bit taken aback but didn't say anything further. When I spoke to my sister, she reminded me of my post explicitly calling out people who didn't get babysitters, people who wouldn't take off of work and those who wouldn't travel for my wedding. I explained that I regretted my words, that I had grown up a lot and I recognized that I had been unfair as my life had changed. My sister replied that I hadn't changed. I just wanted different rules to apply to me when the shoe was on the other foot. She told me that I at least owed it to Paul to send a monetary gift equivalent to what he gave me. I explained that we literally cannot afford to give a gift right now and I feel terrible. Well, lol, you are the idiot. I always wonder what happens to bridezillas after getting married. They stay as bridezillas. Your sister isn't wrong. You haven't really changed. You're just on the other side of the situation now. So you can understand how difficult it was for everyone before and how rude you were despite Paul giving ample notice, and you still having time to figure things out. You decided just to tell Paul you can't find childcare and can't go to his wedding. You literally made no effort. Can't you find a way to make a few bucks, get a friend or family to babysit given how much effort he made for you and the lack of effort you're giving in return? You are a major idiot. Also, your regret means nothing at all. You make no mention of making up for what you did. So all we get is that you feel bad. Guess what? No one cares, no attrition, no empathy. And then you do the very thing even worse to one of the few friends that took your crap and stride hardest idiot of all. And if you're not going, then you're not spending the money on traveling attire. So you should be able to send a stupid gift. You just sound like an awful friend and expect Paul to come to a similar conclusion. Karma's a witch, isn't it? If you can't attend, you can't attend. That happens to people sometimes regardless of how much notice they've given. But it is so unbelievably ironic that you were such a judgmental nightmare during your wedding. And now that you're in the same position, you put many of your guests in, you make excuses, your sister's right. You just don't want the rules to apply to you. You're a hypocrite and that makes you an idiot. You'll probably lose your friend over this. And I don't blame him. Story 4. My husband and I, 42 female, have a tween. He has a daughter, nearly adult from his previous marriage. He's always been super close to her. I think she's a great girl, but I always felt like he favored her over my son. He buys her more stuff, goes out with her more, etc. She comes over to our house on weekends and was with us for a month, but she went back home to her mom a few days ago. He and his ex go out with her a lot and they all have a good relationship, but sometimes they go out more than our family does, but he doesn't see her a lot. So I understand my husband and I only dated for 1 month before I got pregnant, but he stuck around for me after my son was born. We got married a few months later. I got it if he felt more connected to his daughter because he plans to have her. But by now it should be the same, in my opinion. He's always treated our son well though and loves him a lot. Last night, he returned home and told me he had a horrible day at work. I understood and just gave him space. Our son talked to him a lot and my husband ignored him. I was cooking dinner when he asked to play on his phone. My husband said yes and brushed him away. My son came over to help me a few minutes later and still had his phone in his hand. I told him to put it down, but he said he'd be careful. Unfortunately, he wasn't and accidentally dropped it in the sink with the dishes. I didn't see it at first, so it was in there for about 10 seconds before he got it out. He started whining and told me he accidentally dropped his dad's phone in the water. My husband heard and came over. We tried to dry it and turn it on, but it wouldn't. My husband was already having a bad day, but this set him off. He was screaming at him and I tried to stop him, but he kept going. Finally, he was yelling at him for not being more careful and being stupid. What set me off was when he told my son he loves his daughter more than him and that he's always messing up crap and that he needs to be responsible like her. He and I soon got into a fight and I was screaming at him for saying something as horrible as that. Our son was crying at what his dad said and my husband said he was sorry, but his son always broke his stuff. I was honestly so mad that I told him to leave and stay in a hotel for the night. He was furious but just left. I calmed my son down and tried to make him feel better. But even the next day, he was upset. My husband called me this morning and said he was sorry and was just having a bad day and wanted to return home. I told him to give me time and he said I needed to calm down and that he was very sorry. So I told him the same thing and hung up the phone. Story 5. My sister-in-law 42 then called and asked me to forgive him. She said he loves his kids equally and was overreacting. I don't even know how to feel. My husband could have easily gotten his phone fixed and not freaked out. But I know he was having a bad day. Am I the idiot? Your husband's actions. Tell your son that he loves his daughter more. His words only confirmed it. The kid is aware because I'm sure the father's attitude is different too when he's interacting with or talking about his daughter versus his general demeanor with his son. Even when the father's not having a bad day, he sounds like he's dismissive of his son or a kid. He knows not the idiot for being upset. This will stay with your son forever. He doesn't just favor his daughter. He's also expecting a tween to act like an 18-year-old aka a soon-to-be adult. Obviously, the daughter is more mature. But okay, let's just say he said that because he was having a bad day, which still doesn't justify it. I wouldn't let him come home unless he agreed to therapy, couples therapy and individual therapy. He's mentally abusing your son. Tell the flying monkey to back off. Additionally, therapy for the son too. He'll need some help sorting out his thoughts, understanding what happened and learning to process negative emotions. One day, the son will not just cry in the corner, instead he will either rebel or fight back or quietly cut himself out of the family or both. I recently traveled out to my childhood best friend's wedding as it's far away. She and her husband hosted me at their home. It's lovely of them. And I did a lot to help around the house and set up their reception. And thanks, a few weeks before my going up to stay for the wedding, my friend tried to introduce me to a friend of hers and her husband, adding the two of us onto a group chat. He'd seen pictures of me and was interested. I'm currently single, so I was down to talk to him on the group chat to get a feel for him. But he gave off major creep vibes and I was uncomfortable. So I told my friend in private that he wasn't for me and he made me uncomfortable. But thanks for trying. I put that behind me without a second thought and the wedding was beautiful. But then the reception came. It was a formal sit-down reception with set seating and I found I'd been sat beside the guy from before. I wasn't about to kick up a scene though, so I figured I'd just get through the reception. He was worse than the group chat though, and constantly in my space trying to touch me, which I kept rebuffing forcefully. And when I took my phone out during the law, while people were dancing to text my sister, he kept trying to stare at my screen and even playfully reached to grab my phone, saying it was rude to be on my phone during a wedding reception. At this point, I had had enough. I told him to screw off and read the vibe. I ended up spending the rest of the night at the bar, not at the table as the main sit-down portion was over. And I wanted to avoid him the next morning after I cooked breakfast for my friends and her husband. As thanks for hosting me, I told her that she shouldn't have sat me next to him and she'd overstepped, that she knew I didn't feel comfortable with him. She got defensive and told me she thought it'd be easier to get along with him in person than on a message. When I asked her why she hadn't given me the heads up, she had no answer and instead told me that I was being very ungrateful, and they were putting me up for the journey, and how it was rude of me to question her on who she decided to sit where her husband didn't say anything to this, clearly not wanting to get involved with us butting heads. I told her she could have set me anywhere but with him and I'd have been happy, and then began to tell her what had gone down, and she didn't see it as a big deal, saying I didn't know him well enough to get his personality stressing again. I was being unfair to her. I know a wedding is a lot of pressure and it's down to the bride and groom to make choices. But is it really too much to ask to not be sat next to someone in a setup when you've stated he makes you uncomfortable? Am I the idiot? Not the idiot. She dismissed the boundaries. You tried to set much as the guy did. You didn't cause the scene at the wedding and tried to have a conversation afterward, which I think was the most graceful option. However, with her response, I wonder if she deserved the grace. I hope she'll come around and apologize, but I doubt it. I can't. Even your friend thinking him trying to touch you repeatedly is okay shows that she's seriously out of touch. I would have told her you may be okay with him touching you and grabbing things out of your hands, but I'm not. And I have every right to say no when it comes to my body. I'm surprised you lasted as long as you did with that touchy-feely idiot crap. But chances are the seating chart was set when you told her you weren't comfortable. That sort of thing is done. Once RSVPs come in, once you told her you weren't into him, it's clear she counted on you just powering through and being polite for the event's sake. This is possible, and I would have understood had she just stated that. However, I don't think it was exactly set in stone, given that she could swap around some other seats. After family drama on her husband's side, that further proved she was counting on you sucking it up for the sake of her wedding. And that's exactly what you did. You avoided him the best you could. She couldn't even count on her own family not to make a scene. So sad. Her husband didn't say anything. My guess is he knows his friend is a bit of a creep. Just because they let you stay at their house doesn't mean they suddenly own you. It's not ungrateful to tell them that they were in the wrong seating you beside him. It was bad for her to sit him beside you, and even more inappropriate for her to say that you being unhappy or revolted by that guy was unfair to her. It's almost like she treated you and him like Barbie and Ken dolls lose her number. She doesn't respect boundaries.